Thank you for joining us for another episode of Mining Our Business, the program where we discuss happenings in the mineral sector with some of its key players. I am Michael Johnson.
And I'm Khadija Lewis. Today we have as our guest Principal Director in the Minerals Policy Planning and Development Branch, Dr. Oral Rainford, and he's part of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you very much for having me.
Please tell us some more about the Minerals Planning, Policy and Development Branch, its roles and its functions.
All right, thank you. The Minerals Policy Planning and Development Branch is a small part of the ministry. The primary focus is to develop and promote all matters relating to the mining portfolio, mining/minerals portfolio. So we are policy driven. We have a focus on promotion. We have a focus on driving negotiations, etc., meaning in negotiations with the mining companies and a range of other things, making it as best as we possibly can clear what the minerals policy, the government's minerals policy is, and to the extent that we can, crafting responses to challenges ahead of them developing, and challenges which may exist now, certainly do craft policies relating to those. So by and large, those are the things that we do. So if I may just list them, negotiations, policy development, promotions, and by and large, advertising of the sector.
So the mining portfolio was recently added to the Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining Ministry, little less than a year ago. How do you plan in terms of policy to connect this mining portfolio with the existing agriculture and fisheries portfolios?
I would wish to look at it as there being a merger of certain portfolios, and not to say one was added to the other. And there are particular reasons to why one should maybe best look at it like that. How will we contribute to agriculture? Now, the mining sector has for a long time been contributing to agriculture. Of course, there are concerns about the impact that a segment of the sector does have on agricultural pursuits and agricultural production. Now, as it relates to bauxite mining, for example, how do we plan to contribute? We are looking at widening, deepening the use of rehabilitated lands, bauxite lands, for agricultural pursuits, whether we are talking about open field planting or covered planting, greenhouses, shade houses, etc. Secondly, using these rehabilitated areas, or using the pits, the reshaped pits, as catchments for water. And that water is provided to the greenhouses and to the farms. So, quote unquote, you could look at them as mini reservoirs, mini dams. Right? So those are things that we are doing, but these are things that the sector, we would have been doing for quite a number of years. What we have got to try and do is deepen this relationship, because I would not wish for there to be a view that this is something which would have started just now. Right? It predates this current iteration of mining being with agriculture as a ministry. In fact, I think in the last maybe 20 years, this is at least the third time that mining and agriculture would have been together. Maybe the third or fourth time, somewhere there. No. As a ministry, as a portfolio. No. Okay. And that is on the mining side, on the bauxite alumina side. We have done work with persons who have lands where under the thin soil, where you have a thick layer of sand, and with water passing through the thin layer of sand, it then moves rapidly through sand. Sand doesn't retain a lot of water, and in an environment like that, plant growth is stymied. Now, we have overseen overseen, projects involving a removal of that column of sand, the rehabilitating of those areas, the replacing of the soil column, and maybe an addition of additional quantities of soil in that or over those areas. And what we have seen is an improvement in agricultural output. So this is mining related. Some people may say it's sand quarrying, but all of that is mineral production, so it's mining.
Mining nonetheless. All right, so the National Minerals Policy, right, that has been around since what, 2020, or enacted 2020?
Right, enacted.
Right?
Right.
Tell me
But
how.
it really has been around for a little before that.
But formally.
But formally, yes.
So how far advanced are we in terms of implementation?
All right, we are fairly far advanced. We're at different stages of introduction of the policy. So one thing that is that stands out is the movement to create the National Minerals Research and Development Institute. In the policy, the entity is referred to as the National Minerals Institute, but it's the same. So it entails merging of certain functions currently within the Mines and Geology Division, and specifically the Geological Survey segment of that entity, with the functions of the Jamaica Bauxite Institute. A third stream is the likely inclusion of seismic research. And so we're looking at that to create this body which focuses on the development of the mineral sector and driving seismic research and application of that knowledge to construction, to development within the country overall. Yeah. So that is well developed. We have been pursuing matters relating to education, building in the capacity to train our people. We have had a course, two courses, BSc courses, being offered at the University of Technology in mine management, quarry management. And those, I think, would have been in existence now for about 3-4 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, but I think it's not more than 6 years from my recollection. We also have a course, diploma course running with Exed Community College to train persons in quarry management. So these are things that we're doing. And then there are other matters. Really, we've got to get the quality of the leadership of the mines and quarries improved, and improved significantly in some areas. We are pursuing the building out of value addition throughout the sector, and especially as it stands now, the greatest possibility for that lies within the industrial mineral sector, the non-fuel, non-metallic minerals, largely because we have certain limitations, specifically the absence of huge quantities of cheap and abundant fuel or energy overall to drive further development in the bauxite alumina sector. But it is less energy intensive in the industrial mineral sector. So we have been focused on getting more value addition there.
All right, that's a lot of work that you guys are doing.
Well, these things would have started sometime, and we don't look at it as a lot. Well, the philosophy is simply to look at what needs to be done and just go about doing it. Because if you deem it to be difficult, you develop a phobia and you think that you can't get it done, and that is the wrong way to approach it. So we try not to look at it like that.
So the bauxite alumina sector has been around, say, for the better part of what, 70 years or so? From a policy standpoint, where do you see it currently? What is the current status of the sector today?
The sector remains important to the economy. As you know, with respect to the goods producing sector and particularly the traditional exports, the mining sector, and especially bauxite and alumina, those products dominate that segment of the economy, accounting for nothing less than 70% of the value of what we export. Right? There is tremendous opportunity for increased quantities of minerals and mineral products, and I'm going to focus more on mineral products, implying value addition. There is tremendous opportunity for an increase in that segment of the sector, limestone, sand and gravel, etc. And we are pursuing that with a number of persons who are looking to export and to export more. As it relates to high quality, high valued, high purity limestone, we have seen a fair increase this year and last year compared to the years before. And the projections are that 2025 should see an even greater increase over what would have been done in 2022, 2023. And going forward, the opportunity is even much more. Very importantly, the extent to which we're able to integrate, to fuse the outputs of the sector into national production, into, for example, limestone, into soap manufacturing, feed for animals and plants, etc. Looking more at construction, using the materials in those areas, using the material in making adhesives, in making paints, and a range of other products. The more that we can do that, the greater the value that is added, and the more I think people will understand the import, or the sector's import to national development. And everyday life. Your toothpaste, your Tums antacids, the calcium tablets, to an extent, minerals in cosmetics, etc., etc. A range of products, right? We have got to be more focused. So there has to be a laser-like focus in trying to do this. Certainly, to an extent, sorry, some products might be displaced in terms of imports, but the value addition is the focus, and we are moving in that direction. And we're not doing it alone, certainly. And as you are aware, the private sector is the engine of the growth.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that you kind of alluded to was, of course, doing what needs to be done.
Right.
And in the bauxite and alumina industry, we do know that it is an extractive industry, and where the bauxite is located, sometimes it just so happens that people have to be resettled.
Right.
Now, as a mitigating factor, there is the land titling process.
Right.
Tell us some more about that.
So we have the Bauxite Lands Land Titling Committee, which focuses on getting titles to persons who would have been resettled by the bauxite mining companies. So that is one. And when we say getting titles, we're talking about the titles for the properties on which they would have been resettled. So there would have been an exchange. That is one. The second thing is to get the subdivisions which would have been created, because persons are moved and they are formally resettled in communities. So these subdivisions, they have got to be permitted. So they've got to be properly built out to all the standards which apply, and permitted by the municipalities, meaning the parish councils. All right. That process is very involved because you have a range of entities, the fire services, water resources, the people who dictate what the width of the road must be and what carrying capacity it must have, etc. So the National Works Agency, sidewalks, etc. The green spaces, you have NEPA, the National Environment and Planning Agency, and a range of other entities needing to be satisfied that certain conditions have been met. This is not an easy process. It does take some amount of time and certainly financial resources. We are involved with the companies and the government entities which are involved in the land titling and the subdivision permitting processes. These two issues go, they're synchronized, right? So the number of titles that can be generated in any 1 year is closely tied to the number of subdivisions that we can get permitted, or have the companies working with the municipal corporations, etc., being permitted. The process is going on. The committee is comprised of all the bauxite mining companies and all the GOJ entities, the Government of Jamaica entities, that have a relationship with the land titling process and the subdivision permitting process. So the National Land Agency plays a major role, and we are very thankful to them. They have been very supportive of the process. We have the municipal corporations, in which you have bauxite mining operations. They have been very supportive. And of course, you have a range of other entities. The JBI is a part of the process. The Mines and Geology Division, you have, well, it's a range of entities. Right, the stakeholders. I can't name everybody now.
All right, you had briefly mentioned the proposed restructuring of the minerals sector to the merger of some key entities to form the Minerals Institute. How advanced are those plans?
So in terms of the government restructuring institutions focused on managing the mineral sector, we're fairly well advanced in that process. We would have had a consultant complete certain tasks. We are framing out those tasks now. The consultant is to return to complete change management process with the entities that are going to be affected. Job descriptions have been developed, draft schemes structures for the organizational structures for the entity. Those would have been developed, etc. So there is a particular committee within the ministry now that is focused on guiding this process. So we're well advanced.
In terms of port development, what are the plans to develop port development for the exportation of industrial minerals?
Cabinet would have given, Cabinet has given the Port Authority of Jamaica the remit to focus on that matter. Certainly we are involved in the process. Port development, ports are very expensive ventures, all right? And the absence of sufficient number of ports with the required capacity, the required loading equipment, etc., and all of that, staging areas. That issue has put, it has caused a degree of frustration. I think that might be the best way to put it, among certain persons, companies that have gone and have gotten contracts to supply materials. The government has been promoting this area as an area of investment, and persons have been going in the direction. Now, you can't simply export from anywhere because the draft and the facilities that are required, they must be present. And those are present in formal settings. The number of ports are not what or where we would want them to be. We have been working with the bauxite alumina companies to see to what extent we can utilize their ports. And there has been some amount of facilitation there, but much more work needs to be done. So we are in discussions with the Ministry of Finance because they have got to permit the entities that utilize the port, right? And that is a serious matter. Not because the port exists, it doesn't mean that anybody can utilize it. And that is what a number of players are finding out. So we have got to make the required representation and effect the required modifications to the structures that we have to allow for an increase in the number of persons who can utilize the ports. We have done fairly well with Reynolds Pier, which is government owned, and that is down in Ocho. But even there, the number of entities that can utilize the pier is limited by several factors. Certain materials do not travel well, meaning the cost to move the material per kilometer or whatever, per mile, whatever we want to use, is a given cost, right? And the further the port is from the quarry or the mine, the higher that cost. Now, there is a fixed price for certain products. And if you are not within a particular proximity, the economics do not pan out. And we are finding that this is an issue. The issue then becomes how many ports are we going to construct? So the Port Authority is trying to pursue that matter. I believe it might be necessary to have additional entities making investments to create these facilities, because persons have been approaching the Port Authority, making suggestions because they want to make their own investment, because it's a business venture. They have gotten opportunities and they want to materialize them. So we have got to be working hand in glove, all the entities, especially the Port Authority and the different operators of ports, to see to what extent they can facilitate the industrial mineral sector. But that, as we speak, is the state of the situation.
So, with all the factors that you mentioned earlier, to what degree do they have an effect on the creation of an industrial minerals policy, if any?
Well, the industrial minerals policy is a deliverable under the national minerals policy. And so the development of that policy is going on. A submission was sent, a cabinet submission was sent to cabinet several weeks ago, and that is to be taken. I saw something indicating that when the minister is next in cabinet, it is likely that the matter will be taken. Now, the industrial mineral sector, which looks at matters of minerals such as limestone, sand and gravel, volcanic materials, clay, etc., is going to become increasingly more important as the country develops, because a lot of these materials are required for construction purposes and for a range of other uses. In fact, the uses are diffused throughout the economy. As we move the economy with a focus on greater levels of environmental compliance, etc., these minerals are required. And so the policy would have some time ago foreseen some of this, and we're developing the policy to move us into that direction so that we can supply, but not simply supply raw minerals, but as I would have said earlier, to focus especially on value addition. One, and to integrate, to infuse the minerals and minerals development within the economy so that we can create greater levels of value, greater numbers of jobs, generate more income, have more export and greater valued exports, etc., etc. That's the approach that we're taking. The policy is directed in those areas.
What's your vision for the sector? What's your vision for the mineral sector?
Well, the vision for the mineral sector is the state's vision. Remember now, I am a servant of the state, all right? And while I may have personal views, one has to be careful, right? Because wherever the government decides it is going with the sector, that is where we go, all right? And to that extent, I would say this. The state has indicated that the mineral sector remains important. So we are making sure that we understand what we have in terms of the minerals, where we have them, how much we have, what states they're in, how we, and I'm talking about the physical state, how we can develop them, what needs to be done to protect them, because there is this matter of the sterilization of mineral deposits, meaning you are building all sorts of developments on or in proximity to minerals. When that happens, if these materials are to be developed at the surface, they are lost. If you're developing these minerals using subsurface methodologies, going underground, then some of them might be saved, some. So we are making sure that we focus on those things, put in place the required policies to protect the minerals, creating the mineral development zones, the quarry development zones, etc., getting the people educated as much as we can, attracting interest and investment into the sector, of course, in tandem with JAMPRO and other entities. Those are the areas that we are moving in, making it known what opportunities exist, how people can invest, what products can be generated, etc., And of course, very, very importantly, keeping in mind the fact that mineral development occurs in communities. The point was being made and developed on earlier. The extent to which we fail to understand and to work with the communities, the people in the communities, is the extent to which we basically are signing the quote-unquote death warrant of the sector. Because we're not suicidal, we're making sure that we understand the needs of the communities. It has to be a synergistic relationship. We are making sure from this side we put the onus on ourselves and the developers of the minerals to have greater levels of outreach, greater levels of understanding, and make greater levels of input into community development, right? Work with the communities, reduce as far as we possibly can the extent to which we create nuisances, be they dust, be they blasting, etc., in communities. So understanding those issues, making sure that we do not externalize the cost of our operations on community members, understand the import of sequential land use planning. That's an issue, of course, which is not dependent entirely on us, but we would wish to mine the minerals, then rehabilitate the lands, restructure the lands, and then use them for all sorts of purposes. It makes very little sense. We argue that the lands be utilized with the minerals being sterilized, the country not having access to the resources that could be generated, meaning the financial resources and of course the physical resources, the jobs that would have been created. It makes no sense sterilizing the minerals. So if we are able to plan and effectively implement those plans, we argue that that is a much better situation. It offers a much better future. But of course, we don't exist in a vacuum. There are other players, some of whom do not support our vision. And there are entities, certainly, that are of the view that there's no need for mining as a segment of the economy. Of course, we argue to the contrary. And we have shown the extent to which the sector has contributed a significant amount, financially and otherwise, to national development. We think that that is part of the future, that is part of the vision, right? And we are trying to move as best as we can along that pathway, right? Community relations, absolutely important. May I just add that persons can clearly understand. For example, the recent round, the current rounds of construction that we see happening, highways, high rises, etc., housing construction. It is unlikely that these things would be constructed without the use of, without us being able to produce the minerals. Because importing the aggregates, etc., and all of these things, the cost would be almost prohibitive. Just to give an idea. And as I've said, we are going to be particularly important, especially as sea level rises. It is this sector that is going to generate all the materials required to create coastal defense, to raise the level of the land in some areas. If you look, very important pieces of infrastructure are located along the coast. The airports meet, all right. We are going to be a major force, a force for good in that area.
All right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned for another episode of Mining Our Business as we sit down and continue to speak with our key stakeholders and partners in the exploration of this sector. Thank you.